Welcome back to the channel. Okay, so today we are going to be looking at, want to look at a few things, okay, within the time that we have. We're going to be looking at permissions. We're going to be looking at, how to create your own permission yourself, all right, such that you can manage it, you can edit it, you can update it anytime that you want. And also we're going to be looking at groups, okay, and we're also going to be looking at account settings, okay. So let's start from the users, right? So the user, in the last video, we created, a user, and we attached the IAM user change password and then IAM read only access. And of course, we're able to see that the user could not do any other thing apart from just, view what we have within our IAM section, right? That's the only thing that the user could do, basically, right? Now, let's look at the concept of groups, okay? So when you click on user groups, now by default, we don't have any groups here. Now, in AWS, it is actually advised now, and actually it is also best practice that when you have, a user, okay, it is not best practice to assign permissions to your users individually. Because it is not going to be easy to manage that way, right? Imagine if you have 100 users or more than 100 users within your AWS environment, and then you are assigning permissions to them, one by one. Now that's going to be a lot of work, okay? But what you can do is that you can put your users in a group. So let's say you have developers. Let's say you have 5 developers. They are working on the same thing. You can create a group called developers and put the users, all right, that are doing that and put them in that group. Let's say you have maybe your operations people, right? The people who are managing your systems and everything on AWS. You can actually create a group for them, all right, and then put them in that group and then assign permissions to that group. Okay. Now, what basically a group would do for us is that when you put users in a group, you can also assign permissions at the group level, which means any permission you assign to a group, all the users that belong to that group will also inherit that permission. So that way it becomes more easier to manage your permissions, to manage your policies, all right, and all of that. Now, when I talk about permissions and policies, they basically mean the same thing. So you will hear me sometimes say, oh, permissions, and then some other time you hear me say policies. They basically means the same thing. Okay. Now, let's create a group. So if I click here to create a group, here, I can give my group any name that I want. All right, so let's just call this developers. All right, so here you can actually add a user straight up if you want. And of course, you may not add any user right here. Okay, so here I'm going to come here and assign a permission to this user or to the group, and that will be IAM full access. Okay, so basically I'm granting this group IAM full access. So I'm going to come here and select the user and then create a user group. All right, so here I have a group, but there is no user, and I have permissions, all right, that says IAM full access. Okay, so now I can actually come here under users and say add user, and then I can select my DevOps user, and then I can add this user, all right, to that group. Now, remember, this user already has a permission assigned to it, which is IAM read only access, right? That's the permission that we assigned to this user. But now, this user is now a member of a group that has the permission what? IAM full access. And we have said that when you assign, all right, a permission to a group, every user in that group will inherit, all right, that permission. Now, what I want us to look at together is, let's go back to this user, let's refresh, let's see if this user is able to create an IAM account, or based on the permission that has been assigned to the group that this user now belongs, all right, to. So let's take a look at that. So this is the user right here. So you can see the user DevOps here. Okay, so let's go back to users. Let's try to create a user, all right? Based on the new permission that this user has inherited from its group, this user should be able, all right, to create, all right, a user. Because the group now has IAM full access, which means the user can do anything they want within, all right, the IAM environment. So let's call this user test IAM. All right, let's just say next. We're not bothered about anything for now. I'm just going to say next, and then I'm going to say create user. Now, interestingly, this user has been able, or is now able to create, all right, a user, and there's no error at all. And that is because when it comes to evaluating the permission that your user has, all right, it will first look at the permission assigned at the group level before going to the permission assigned at the user level. Okay, which means the permission assigned at the group level, all right, will override the permission assigned at individual level. Because I mean, if permissions assigned at the individual level, all right, takes precedence, then this user will not be able to create a user. Okay? But because the permission at the group level is what takes precedence, now this user is able to create another user because I mean, the permission assigned to the group that this user belongs to, all right, is IAM full access. And that means this user can do anything within the system, including deleting the user, right? So that means if this user should come here, it can also delete this user, right? So you can copy this username, okay, copy the username here, paste it here, and delete the user, and let's see what happens. This user is able to do that, which means this user is actually working with the permission assigned at the group level, not the permission assigned to this user at the individual level. Because if you click on this user, for example, and then under permissions, you're going to see something here. All right, let's see what we have. Now, under permissions, it says there's IAM read only and there's what IAM, all right, there's IAM full access. Okay, but now here is the thing. Here, under this particular permissions boundary and some other stuff here, it is saying you need permission. It says user devils is not authorized to perform access analyzer list policy generation on this particular resource, which means the IAM full access does not also come with certain permissions. Okay, so the IAM full access comes with, okay, you creating a user, deleting the user, assigning permissions to user, and things like that. Okay, but of course, I mean, full access means within that environment, you can still do, all right, certain things without any kind of challenge. Okay, and if you look at it here, it says attached via the group, and these ones were attached directly. Okay, but what I just want us to know is that permission at the group level takes precedence above, all right, the permission at the individual user level. Is that okay? Now, another thing I would like to point out very quickly is that you can have, all right, a user, all right, in many groups on AWS. That is a possibility, okay? Which means a user can belong to multiple groups. But what cannot happen is that you cannot have a group belonging to another group, which means you can't have what you call a nested group, all right? So group are independent entity on their own, okay, without the possibility of nesting group inside of another, okay, which means you cannot have group A inside group B, all right? So which means group A will be on its own, group B will be on its own, group C will be on its own. But what is possible is that you can have user A belonging to group A, you can have user A belonging to group B, you can have user A belonging to group C, which means one user can belong to the three groups and there'll be no challenge. And of course, each of the policy assigned to each of the groups, the user will also inherit that permission. All right? But of course, you cannot have what? A group inside of another group. All right, I hope that is clear. Now, another thing I quickly want to share with us is these account settings. Now, let's click on account settings. Now, what is account setting? All right, now under the account setting, you have what you call password policy. At this level, this is what I want us to look at, password policy. Now, you can set password policy, all right, for your users. Basically, what is password policy? Password policy basically means how you want your users to manage their passwords, which means how often do you want them to change their password, right? Do you want them to reuse, okay, an expired password? All right, all those kind of things. And in terms of complexity, how complex do you want your password to be? Right? Do you want your password to just be numbers alone? Do you want your password to be a mix of numbers and letters? Or do you want your password to have a mix of both uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and even non-alphanumerical, all right, characters? Okay, so under the account settings, this is where you can set the password policy. So here, if I click on edit, now I can go with the IAM default, all right, and this is the default here, but of course I can also create my own policy. So here, if I click on custom, it shows me the password minimum length. So which means I can have a password that is between 6 to 128 characters. Now, the password policy that you're going to create here would actually depend on your organization, policy. In some organization, their minimum password length is maybe 12 characters. For some, it is 8 characters. For some, it is 6 characters. For some, it is 10 characters. Okay? So the number of length, all right, in terms of character here will be determined by your organization policy. But AWS has given us a guide, which means you cannot have a password that is more than 128 characters in length. Okay? I mean, that's not going to make sense, right? I mean, who's going to remember that? Okay? So here you can put it here and say you want 10. And then here you can define your password strength, right? How strong do you want the password to be? How complex do you want the password to be? So here you can say you want your password to have one uppercase, you want your password to have one lowercase, you want your password to have at least one number, and then maybe one alphanumeric, which means your users will be required to combine all of these, all right, in order for them to be able to create a password or to change their password successfully. All right. Now, there are other requirements as well. Okay. Now, here you can turn on password expiration, which means you want their password to expire after a number of days. Okay. So here you can say password should expire in 40 days. All right. For some organizations, it can be 21 days. For some organizations, you want them to change their passwords every 14 days. Now, these are some security things that you want to take into account. Because, I mean, when it comes to cybersecurity, human beings are actually the weakest link. The systems that we're using are not deficient in themselves. It is the users, handling those systems that sometimes mess the system up. I mean, if you remember the CloudStrike issue that happened recently, that airlines were not able to fly, banks were not able to make, transactions and all of that, everybody basically was grounded. Now, it wasn't the CloudStrike software that had issues. It was the fact that somebody initiated, an update that they have not even tested. And that was where the challenge happened. So the system in itself, the software in itself are not flawed. All right, of course, I mean, the software will still have to undergo some updates regularly. But of course, human beings are always where the problem is. All right. So here, you may want to say that you want them to change their password frequently, maybe every 14 days or every 21 days or every 30 days. That would depend on your organization policy. Okay. Now here, another thing here says password expiration requires administrator reset. Now for me, I don't think that is necessary because you don't have to as an administrator reset password for every user. Users can reset, they can change their own password themselves. I mean, that way they take responsibility for whatever happens within their account, right? So I don't think that is necessary. Now here, allow users to change their own password. Of course, we are going to check that because we want them to take control, of managing their credentials. We don't want to interfere in that process. Okay, so we're going to check that. Now, the last one says prevent password reuse. Now, there are some users and organizations that they are just, they're just lazy. All right, which means they don't just want to bother their head, right? So we just, when the password expires, they just want to reuse a former password, which means the password they just used now is what they will just put in again. And that is a security risk because, I mean, if somebody has that password already, that means the person can compromise the system. And we do not want that to happen, right? So here we want to prevent password reuse. Now here it says remember dash number of passwords, which means here we can say, well, before you can even reuse a password, you must have changed your password this number of times, right? So if I put 10 here, for example, I am saying that the system should remember at least 10 passwords. Okay? That means you can't reuse any of those passwords, right? And then it also defines, when you can actually use a password. So here, if I say remember 10 passwords, I'm actually saying if the user changes their password today, the system will keep track of that, and save that. Tomorrow, if they come again and then they want to change their password and they're trying to use the same password, the system is basically just going to look at it and say, oh no, this password has been used before. No, you can't use this again, right? And then it can remember up to, 24 passwords. So here needs to be between 1 and 24. which means you can actually say that the system should remember at least 24 different passwords. Which means if you have used like 24 different passwords at some point, you can't reuse any of those passwords again, because the system already has that record. If you have tried to change your password before on some platforms and then you want to use a password you used before, you're going to see that prompt that will tell you, no, this password has been used before, right? Basically, they are preventing you, all right, from using a password you used before, because if you try that, the system can be, all right, compromised. Okay, so this is how you can set your password policy, and then once you save changes, then every user in your account, all right, this policy would apply to them. So the next time they want to change their password, they have to meet all of this requirement before they can change, all right, their passwords. So that is how to set your, all right, account settings in terms of password policy on AWS. All right, good. Now let's take a look at policies. Now here, under policies, you have over 1,000 policies here. And a number of the policies that we have here are actually defined by AWS. They are AWS managed policies, which means AWS is the one managing them. All right, they manage the life cycle of these policies. They update it regularly and all of that, right? But we can also create our own policies. All right, we can also create our own policies. So how do you do that? Now, I told us in the last video, there are the two types of policies. There's the AWS managed policy, there's the the customer managed policies, right? The customer managed policies are the policies that you manage, right? You can modify, you can update, you can delete your own managed policy. If you click on any of these policies here, you can delete it actually. Right? And if you go to actions, you can only attach and you can also detach, which means you can't modify any of these policies. The only thing you can do is to attach it to a user, attach it to something, or you can detach it, all right, from something as well. You can't also delete, all right, an AWS managed policy. Okay, so let's create our own policy and let's see how we can do this as well. Now, there are different ways to actually create a policy. So there's the virtual editor and then there's the JSON, all right, editor. Okay, now the JSON editor is like this. Of course, if you understand JSON, you can of course go ahead and use this method. JSON basically stands for JavaScript Object Notation. All right, it's basically a key value pair, all right, kind of language where you define a key and then you assign a value. Okay, so that is JSON. But of course, we can also use the virtual editor, which basically it's more easier, all right, for us to use. Okay. So here, under the service, you have to select the service you want to create a policy for. So here, I'm going to say IAM. So, sorry, I don't know why I'm typing IAM here, it sends, all right? So IAM. So if you click on IAM, right now, when you are trying to create a policy, there are different levels, right? Now, one of the levels is actions allowed, all right? Now, what action do you want to allow? Now, under the actions allowed, you have like 4 different access levels, right? There's the least access, there's the read access, there's write access, there's permission management, and there's also tagging. Okay? Now, when it comes to policy, if you have watched the Linux video that we did, we talked about, 3 levels, right, of access in Linux. We talked about read, we talked about write, we talked about execute permissions as well. Okay, so here you also have list. Now, list is the same thing as read. Okay, but basically there are different, functions within the list and the read. But basically you can categorize the two of them as basically read access. Somebody that can list something cannot write. Okay, if somebody can list an item, it doesn't mean that that person can modify that item. Okay, so when you're saying you're giving somebody a list access, a view access, a read access, a get access, all of these things are still under the read permissions. Okay, now when it comes to modification, right, you want somebody to delete something, you want somebody to be able to create something, you want someone to be able to modify something. Okay, now all of that are basically categorized under the write permission. All right, those are categorized under what? Write permission. Okay, now on AWS, you have the actions allowed, which is what action specifically do you want your users to be able to perform? Now, apart from allowing the action, there is what you call effect. So effect is, do you want to allow this action or do you want to deny this action? Right? So that means if I select an action, I can actually deny somebody from performing that action, or I can allow someone from performing that action. So basically, it's a true or false thing. It's a Boolean thing, basically. Okay? So this person can do this, or this person can't do this. So your actions can either be allowed or denied. So here you have the effect, which is allow or deny. So if I select any actions here and I say deny, it means that if I attach this policy to a user, I'm basically denying that user from performing those actions. Do you understand that? All right. So here, let's expand list. So if you expand list, you can see a list of things. So list account alias, list access keys, list groups. All right, these are basically what a user can do under the list policy. If you expand read, there are 32 of them. All right, this person can get an account name, generate a report, get organization access report. All right, get front public key, group policy, get group. A lot of things that the user can do. All right, here. So you can select any of these, okay, get credential report depending on what you want, and then you can click on write. There are 62 write actions that can also be done. So here you can see change password is a write action, create a group is also a write action, create access key is also a write action, create role is also a write action. So you can see some delete actions here as well. Delete user, all right, delete group, create something, reset. All right, it's also a write action, remove, all right, update, all right, those are write actions. Under the permissions management, you can also see some actions here. So this is going to be, all right, a mix of, different actions. So here you have the create policy. So anywhere you see create, anywhere you see delete, anywhere you see update, anywhere you see put, all right, those are write actions, all right. But anywhere you find get, anywhere you see list, those are read actions, okay. So under tagging, we also have tag, right? We have on tag policy, all right, on tag user, on tag role. So these are permissions that you can actually allow. So let's go ahead and just select one or two of these and see how it works. So I'm going to click on list group. All right, I'm going to click here on, let's see. I'm going to click on get group. I'm going to click on get user. All right, I'm going to click on what again can we click on? So under the right actions, I'm going to click on create group, and I'm going to click on create a user. All right, so I'm going to click on create group, and then I'm going to click on create user. All right, and I'm going to come here to, all right, now that's all we have to do. So let's just look at how this works. Now, here we have selected the actions that we want our users to be able to perform, and we have selected 5 actions. And the effect here is what? Allow. So which means we are allowing these actions that we have selected. Okay. Now remember, we selected create group and create user. We didn't select any kind of delete here. Okay, just take note of that. We selected get user, we selected get group, all right, we selected list groups as well. Okay, so I want us to watch something. Now here under the resources, we have all and we have specific. So all means, right, which means, this action, this effect should be applied to any resource within our AWS environment. But if you want to be specific, you can also say that, all right, this action should be, all right, specific to this particular user, all right, or this particular group. Okay, so basically you can click on add ARN, all right, and then add the ARN of any group that you know. All right, so basically you can have resources here, and then you can select, all right, a group right here. Is that okay? So you can also do that, right? Now, so if you do that, that means this particular policy that you're creating is going to be associated to that specific group. Okay, so that is what it is. And you can also attach it to what? To a user. Okay, now let's just say all, right? So which means, everybody. Okay, now I am creating this policy using, all right, this DevOps user. So let's try to create and see if this would work. All right, so let's say next. Okay, and then here it's telling us, all right, we have services IAM. So these are the access level that we selected, and then we're applying it to all resources. So I'm going to call this policy, all right, IAM user policy. And then if I have a description, I can give it here. If I don't have, I can say create policy. And let's see if it works. Now we can see that this user is able to what? Create a policy. Okay, user is able to create a policy. The reason this user can create a policy is simply because, all right, the group that this user belongs to, all right, allows the creation of policies, because I mean it has IAM full access, right? If you come here and look at the IAM, all right, if you come here and look at the IAM full access policy, if you expand it, all right, you can see that here, these are the actions that, all right, have been described that this particular, all right, policy allows. So here, this, all right, these permissions allow to describe account, describe organization, describe policy, all right, list policies, all right, and all of that. So basically, the IAM full access allows our users, all right, to do all of these things, okay? But now, let's go back, all right, to our main user here, all right, to our, administrator. And then let's come here to the developer group that we created, all right, and let us come here and remove this IAM full access. Remove that, okay? And then let us add a permission. Attach policy. Remember, we've created our own policy, right? So I can search for my policy here, IAM, all right, user. So here I can see my IAM user policy, and it says what? Customer managed policy, right? So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to attach this policy, right? Now I have attached this policy to this group. Now let's go back to that IAM user and find out, all right, what this user can still do, all right, based on this new development, okay? So let's see what the user can do. Now remember, we selected create user, we selected create group. Now let's say, for example, I go to the user group, all right, and let's say I want to delete this group. Now I want to perform a delete action, okay? So let's see what happens. I'm going to say delete, all right? All right, so let me copy the group here and then paste it here, and then let's say delete. Now let's see what did it say? User group not what? Not deleted. Because the new permission that we have assigned to this group, all right, basically limits what our users can now do. So we have defined our own policy in such a granular way, because I mean, if you expand this, you can also see what the policy allows. So here, the policy allows the creation of group, listing groups, getting users, creating users, and of course to get group, which means part of this policy does not include deleting. Even a user cannot be deleted, all right? That means, I mean, you can't delete a user with this particular group. That means if I come here and I go to users, for example, all right, and I come here and I say I want to delete this user, for example, all right, so let's come here. So let's say we want to delete this particular user, and I come here to say delete user. Now look at what it says. It says this particular user is not authorized to perform this action, all right? Is not allowed what? To perform the action. It's not authorized. Because I mean, this user is operating based on the policy attached to the group that this user belongs to. So that is basically how you can set up your own users, all right? How you can attach policies to them, create your own policy, attach it to your users based, all right, on your use case and based on what your users, all right, are expected to do. Okay, so with this that we have done, I believe you have an understanding of what, all right, IAM is about. The next one we're going to talk about is roles, and that is going to be a very quick lecture, all right, about roles. Okay, and of course, I'm not going to take our time on that. Okay, so we're going to see, all right, in the next video. Okay, thank you so much, all right, and don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to like, don't forget to share. We have amazing content, all right, coming up on the channel, and I'm sure you don't want to miss any of that. All right, so thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.